The bitter Montana wind howled across the desolate plain as Clara Matthews huddled beneath a frayed woolen blanket, her thin frame shivering against the wooden wall of the stagecoach station. $1, that's all she had left to her name, all she was worth in this world that had taken everything else from her. Clara had never imagined finding herself here, 21 years old, and completely alone in the Montana Territory of 1876. The stagecoach that had delivered her to this remote outpost had departed hours ago, taking with it her last connection to civilization. Now she sat, watching the approaching sunset with growing dread, her stomach empty and her prospects emptier. "Ain't proper for a lady to be sitting out here with night coming on," a gruff voice called from behind her. Clara turned, startled to find an older woman standing in the doorway of the station, arms crossed over her ample bosom. "I haven't anywhere else to go," Clara admitted, clutching her single coin tightly in her palm. "I have only this." She held up the dollar, its silver surface catching the last rays of sunlight. The woman's weathered face softened slightly. "That ain't much to start a new life on, girl." "It's all I'm worth," Clara whispered, more to herself than to the woman. Before the station keeper could respond, the thunder of approaching hooves drew their attention. 3 riders appeared on the horizon, silhouettes against the dying light. Clara tensed, fear rising in her throat. In her experience, men brought nothing but pain. The riders approached at a steady pace, and as they drew closer, Clara could make out their features. 2 older men flanked a younger one, whose broad shoulders and straight posture marked him even at a distance. When they reached the station, the younger man dismounted first, his movements fluid and confident. "Evening, Mrs. Holloway," he called to the station keeper, tipping his hat. His voice was deep but gentle, nothing like what Clara expected from a man of his imposing stature. "Wyatt Blackwood, Mrs." Holloway greeted him with unexpected warmth. "What brings you and your men out this way so late?" "Supply run," he answered. Then his eyes landed on Clara. For a moment he just looked at her, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat brim. "Madam," he acknowledged with a slight nod. Clara lowered her eyes, clutching her blanket tighter around her shoulders. "This here's a girl come in on the eastbound stage," Mrs. Holloway explained. "Says she's got nowhere to go and nothing but $1 to her name." The man called Wyatt studied Clara more intently. "What's your name, miss?" "Clara Matthews," she answered softly, still not meeting his gaze. "You have family around these parts?" Clara shook her head. "No, sir." "She needs work, Wyatt," Mrs. Holloway interjected. "Can't stay here. My husband won't allow it." Wyatt removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. Clara was surprised to find kindness in those eyes, something she hadn't seen directed at her in a very long time. "My sister passed on last winter," he said carefully. "Been looking for someone to help with the house and cooking. It's honest work, Miss Matthews. You'd have a roof and 3 meals." Clara's heart raced. Was this providence or peril? In her experience, men rarely offered something for nothing. "I don't know the first thing about ranch work," she admitted. "Can you cook?" Wyatt asked. "Yes." "Clean?" "Yes, sir." "That's all I'm asking for." He extended his hand not toward Clara but toward Mrs. Holloway. "I'll take responsibility for her, Mrs." Holloway seemed satisfied with this arrangement. "You're a good man, Wyatt Blackwood, not like your father, God rest his soul." A shadow passed over Wyatt's face, but he quickly recovered. "Miss Matthews, we'd best be going if we're to make it back before full dark. That is, if you accept my offer." Clara looked at her dollar, then back at Wyatt Blackwood. What choice did she have? Die here of exposure or take a chance on this stranger? "I accept," she whispered, rising unsteadily to her feet. Wyatt instructed one of his men to give up his horse for Clara. The older man did so without complaint, choosing to ride alongside Mrs. Holloway's husband back to town. "You ever been on a horse before, Miss Matthews?" Wyatt asked as he helped her gather her meager belongings, a small carpet bag containing all that remained of her former life. "Not since I was a child," she admitted. "Well, this old girl is gentle as they come." He patted the mare's neck. "Name's Bonnie." Clara approached the horse cautiously. Wyatt's hands were suddenly at her waist, lifting her effortlessly onto the saddle. She gasped at the unexpected contact, but he stepped away quickly, respecting her space. "Hold the reins like this," he demonstrated, then handed them to her. "Bonnie will follow my horse. You just keep your balance." As they rode away from the station, Clara clutched her dollar in one hand and the reins in the other. She had no idea what awaited her at Wyatt Blackwood's ranch, but she knew with certainty that her life was about to change forever. The journey to the Blackwood ranch took nearly an hour. Clara's back ached from the unfamiliar posture required to stay seated on the horse, but she did not complain. The Montana landscape sprawled around them, vast and beautiful in the fading light, mountains looming in the distance. "Not much further," Wyatt called back to her as they crested a small hill. Below them spread a valley, and nestled within it, Clara could make out a collection of buildings. As they approached, she saw a substantial log house, a large barn, several smaller outbuildings, and corrals filled with horses. It was larger than she had expected. "This is all yours?" she asked, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. Wyatt nodded. "My father started with nothing but 20 acres and built it into one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory. 2,000 acres now. We run cattle mainly, but I've been breeding horses too." "It's beautiful," Clara whispered. They rode into the yard, where a young boy of about 12 ran out to greet them. "Uncle Wyatt," he called excitedly. "Did you bring the supplies?" "Sure did, Charlie. Where's your pa?" "In the barn with a colicky horse." The boy's eyes fixed on Clara. "Who's she?" "This is Miss Matthews. She's going to be helping around the house." "Miss Matthews, this is my nephew, Charlie. His father, James, is my foreman and brother-in-law." Clara nodded at the boy, who studied her with undisguised curiosity. Wyatt dismounted and came to help Clara down. His hands were strong but gentle on her waist, and she was grateful for the support as her legs nearly buckled beneath her. "Riding takes some getting used to," he said with a small smile. "Charlie, take Miss Matthews' bag to Sarah's old room, would you?" The boy grabbed Clara's carpet bag and ran toward the house. Wyatt led Clara across the yard, explaining as they walked. "James and Charlie live in a cabin just behind the main house. After my sister died, they stayed on. James has been with the ranch since before I was born, and Charlie, well, he's the closest thing to family I've got left." Clara listened, trying to absorb all the information while simultaneously taking in her new surroundings. The main house was impressive, 2 stories of solid logs with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Inside, she found it unexpectedly well appointed, with proper furniture, woven rugs, and even a few paintings on the walls. "My sister kept things nice," Wyatt explained, noticing her surprise. "Since she's been gone, we've managed, but it's not the same." He showed her to a small but comfortable bedroom on the first floor. "This was Sarah's sewing room. We moved in a bed after she passed. Bathrooms down the hall. We have indoor plumbing. My father insisted on modern conveniences." Clara set her single dollar on the bedside table and looked around the room. It was the nicest place she'd slept in months. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood." "Wyatt," he corrected. "We're not formal around here. Get some rest. Tomorrow I'll show you around properly and we can discuss your duties." When he left, Clara sat on the edge of the bed, hardly believing the turn her fortunes had taken. From destitute and alone to housed and employed in the span of an evening. Yet a lifetime of disappointments had taught her to be wary of good fortune. Men like Wyatt Blackwood, handsome, prosperous, kind, they didn't exist in her experience. Sleep eluded her that night, her mind racing with questions about her new employer and what he truly expected of her. When dawn broke, she was already dressed in her one decent dress, hair neatly braided, waiting to begin her new life. The kitchen was empty when she entered, the hearth cold. She found wood stacked neatly beside it and set about building a fire, determined to prove her worth. By the time heavy footsteps announced Wyatt's arrival, Clara had coffee brewing and was searching the pantry for breakfast ingredients. "You're up early," Wyatt remarked, surprise evident in his voice. "I wanted to make myself useful right away," Clara replied, not meeting his eyes. "You don't have to prove anything, Miss Matthews, Clara," she corrected, echoing his request for informality from the night before. "And yes, I do have to prove myself. I won't be a burden." Wyatt poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter watching her. "Fair enough. Breakfast for the hands is usually simple. Biscuits, bacon, eggs if we have them. They eat at the bunkhouse, but James, Charlie, and I take our meals here." Clara nodded, relieved to have clear instructions. "I'll have it ready in 20 minutes." True to her word, by the time James and Charlie arrived, Clara had a hearty breakfast on the table. The men ate with enthusiasm, complimenting her cooking. "Haven't had biscuits this good since Sarah," James said, his voice gruff with emotion. He was a tall, lean man with a perpetually serious expression, but his eyes softened when he looked at his son. "Uncle Wyatt, can Miss Matthews stay forever?" Charlie asked, reaching for another biscuit. "That's up to Miss Matthews," Wyatt replied, his eyes meeting Clara's across the table. "But I hope she'll consider it." After breakfast, Wyatt took Clara on a tour of the ranch. The property was vast and beautiful, with the main house and outbuildings nestled in a valley surrounded by rolling hills and distant mountains. Fields stretched as far as she could see, dotted with cattle. "We run about 500 head," Wyatt explained as they walked. "Used to be more, but the harsh winters the last few years have taken their toll." Clara listened, asking questions when appropriate, trying to understand the business that sustained this small community. She learned that in addition to Wyatt, James, and Charlie, there were 8 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse. During busy seasons, they hired additional help. "And what will my duties be?" she asked as they returned to the house. "Cooking, cleaning, mending whatever needs doing to keep the house running," Wyatt replied. "It's not easy work, but it's honest. You'll have Sundays to yourself and you're welcome to use the library. My father was a great reader." Clara was shown to a room filled with more books than she had ever seen outside a public library. Her fingers itched to explore the shelves. "You like to read?" Wyatt asked, noticing her expression. "Very much. My father was a schoolteacher before he died." It was the first personal information she had volunteered. "Then please, use this room as much as you like." Wyatt's smile was genuine. "Now I've got work to do. Will you be all right on your own?" Clara nodded, already feeling more at ease. "Yes, thank you." The days fell into a rhythm. Clara rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent the mornings cleaning and baking, the afternoons doing laundry or mending, and the evenings preparing dinner. It was hard work, but satisfying in a way she hadn't expected. Wyatt was often gone from sunup to sundown, managing the ranch's operations, but he always made time to check on her, to ask if she needed anything, to thank her for her work. His kindness remained consistent, without any hidden motives that Clara could discern. 2 weeks after her arrival, Clara was hanging laundry in the yard when she overheard 2 ranch hands talking on the other side of the clothesline. "Boss sure found himself a pretty one this time," one said. "Bet she won't last the winter," the other replied. These city girls never do. Remember that last one he brought home, the widow from Helena? Yeah, she took off after a month, couldn't handle the isolation. This one's different though. Heard the boss say he found her with nothing but $1 to her name, nowhere else to go. That type's even worse. They get comfortable, then start making demands. Mark my words, she'll be asking for a ring before Christmas. Clara's hands trembled as she pinned a shirt to the line. So there had been others before her. Women Wyatt had brought to the ranch, perhaps with the same kind words and promises of honest work. What had happened to them? And what did he truly want from her? That evening she served dinner in silence, her mind racing with questions she was afraid to ask. Wyatt noticed her mood but didn't comment until after James and Charlie had left for their cabin. "You're quiet tonight," he observed as she cleared the dishes. "I'm tired," she replied, not meeting his eyes. "Clara." His use of her first name made her look up. "If something's bothering you, I'd rather you say it outright." She set down the plates with a clatter. "How many women have you brought here before me?" Wyatt's eyebrows rose in surprise. "What?" "I heard the men talking about the other women you've brought to the ranch. The ones who didn't stay." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like hurt. "I see. And you think I make a habit of collecting stranded women?" "I don't know what to think," Clara admitted. "I know nothing about you except that you offered me a position when I had nowhere else to go. Why would you do that for a stranger?" Wyatt sighed and gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down, please." Reluctantly, Clara obeyed. "There have been 2 women who have worked here since my sister died," he explained. Mrs. Peterson, a widow from Helena, stayed for about a month before deciding ranch life wasn't for her. Then Mrs. Caldwell, an older lady from Billings, who left when her daughter had a baby and needed help. Both were hired through proper channels with references. "And me?" Clara asked. "You were different," Wyatt admitted. "I saw someone in need and I had a need myself. It seemed like providence. But why take such a risk? I could have been anyone." A shadow crossed Wyatt's face. "My sister, Sarah, ran away when she was 16. Got mixed up with a man who mistreated her. By the time we found her, she was pregnant with Charlie and living in squalor. James was working for us then. He married her, gave Charlie his name, brought her home." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "She used to say that one act of kindness saved her life. I suppose I was hoping to pass that kindness forward." Clara felt ashamed of her suspicions. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have doubted your intentions." "No, you were right to question." "A woman alone has to be careful." Wyatt stood, indicating the conversation was over. "I hope you'll stay, Clara. You've brought life back to this house. But if you ever want to leave, just say the word, and I'll ensure you have the means to go wherever you choose." With that, he left her alone with her thoughts. Clara finished cleaning the kitchen mechanically, her mind replaying his words. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that not all men were like her stepfather. That perhaps Wyatt Blackwood was exactly what he appeared to be, a decent man trying to do right by others. As autumn progressed, Clara found herself settling into life at the Blackwood Ranch. The work was hard but satisfying, and she took pride in restoring order to the house that had clearly suffered from a woman's absence. She discovered Sarah's recipes, tucked in a drawer in the kitchen, and began recreating the dishes that had once been family favorites. Charlie became her shadow whenever he wasn't in school or helping with ranch chores, curious about everything she did and eager to share stories about his mother. Through him, Clara began to form a picture of the woman whose place she had taken: brave, kind, stubborn, and deeply loved. James remained more reserved, but his gruff approval was evident in the way he nodded at her cooking, or the occasional "Sarah would have done it just that way" that he offered when she made some improvement to the house. And then there was Wyatt. After their conversation about his motives, something had shifted between them. He began lingering over breakfast, telling her about the day's plans. In the evenings, he would sometimes join her in the library, each reading silently but enjoying the companionship. Clara found herself noticing things about him, the way the corners of his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how gentle his hands were when he repaired a broken chair, the deep rumble of his laugh when Charlie said something amusing. Dangerous thoughts for a woman in her position. One evening in late October, a fierce storm blew in from the mountains. Wind howled around the house, rattling the windows, and rain pounded on the roof with such force that conversation became difficult. Clara was in the kitchen, preparing to start dinner when Wyatt burst through the door, soaking wet. "The creek's rising fast," he said without preamble. "We need to move the horses from the lower pasture." "Is there anything I can do?" Clara asked, already reaching for a towel to hand him. "Keep the fire going and have hot coffee ready. We'll be cold and wet when we get back." He took the towel gratefully, then hesitated. "And Clara, if the water reaches the barn, ring the bell. We might not hear it over the storm, but it's worth trying." With that, he was gone, back into the raging storm. Clara watched from the window as he and the other men rode out, bent low against the driving rain. Fear clutched at her heart, not just for herself, but for them. She kept busy, stoking the fire, brewing coffee, and preparing a hearty stew that could simmer until their return. Every few minutes, she checked the window, but the rain was so heavy she could barely see the barn, let alone the creek beyond it. Hours passed with no sign of the men. The storm showed no signs of abating, and Clara's worry grew. Finally, unable to stand the waiting any longer, she donned a heavy coat and boots and ventured outside. The force of the wind nearly knocked her over as she stepped off the porch. Rain pelted her face, making it difficult to see, but she pressed on toward the barn. The ground was saturated, water pooling around her boots with each step. When she reached the barn, she could see why Wyatt was concerned. The creek, normally a gentle stream about 50 yards behind the building, had swollen to a raging torrent that was now lapping at the back wall of the barn. If it rose much further, it would flood the structure and potentially undermine its foundation. Clara made her way to the bell post near the barn entrance. The large iron bell was used to signal mealtimes and emergencies. She pulled the rope with all her strength, sending its deep tone pealing across the property. Again and again she rang it, hoping the sound would carry over the storm's fury. On her 8th pull, the rope suddenly gave way, sending her stumbling backward. She lost her footing on the slick ground and fell hard, pain shooting through her ankle. Struggling to her feet, she found she couldn't put weight on the injured limb. The rain was coming down even harder now, and the creek had risen another few inches in just the short time she'd been outside. Clara knew she needed to get back to the house, but the distance seemed insurmountable with her injured ankle. She was trying to fashion a crutch from a broken fence post when a figure on horseback emerged from the gloom. Wyatt. Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by embarrassment at her predicament. "Clara," he shouted over the storm, dismounting and rushing to her side. "What are you doing out here?" "The creek was rising," she explained, gesturing weakly toward the water. "You said to ring the bell." His expression softened from concern to something like admiration. "You're soaked through. Can you walk?" "I fell my ankle." Without hesitation, Wyatt scooped her into his arms. "Hold onto my neck," he instructed, carrying her toward the house with long, determined strides. Clara's heart raced at the closeness, at the feeling of being held so securely against his chest. Despite the cold rain, warmth spread through her body. Inside, Wyatt set her gently on the sofa and knelt to examine her ankle. His touch was careful as he removed her boot and sock. "It's swelling, but I don't think it's broken," he said after a moment. "Just a bad sprain. You'll need to stay off it for a few days." Clara nodded, suddenly very aware of how bedraggled she must look, with her hair plastered to her face and her dress clinging to her skin. "The others, did they get the horses moved?" "Yes, they're safe on higher ground. James and the men are keeping watch in case the water rises further." Wyatt stood and retrieved a blanket from a nearby chair, draping it around her shoulders. "You should change into dry clothes. Can you manage, or do you need help?" "I can manage," Clara said quickly, her cheeks flushing at the thought. Wyatt nodded and helped her stand, supporting her weight as she hopped toward her bedroom. At the door he paused. "Thank you, Clara, for ringing the bell, for caring about this place and the people in it." Their eyes met, and for a moment Clara couldn't breathe. There was something in his gaze that made her heart flutter in a way it never had before. "I'll check on you in a bit," he said softly, breaking the spell. "Call if you need anything." Alone in her room, Clara changed into a dry nightgown and robe, then sat on the edge of her bed, her thoughts in turmoil. She had come to care for this place, for Charlie and James, and most dangerously, for Wyatt himself. But what right did she have to such feelings? She was an employee, nothing more. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Clara, may I come in?" "Yes," she called, adjusting her robe to ensure she was properly covered. Wyatt entered, carrying a tray with a steaming mug and a small bowl. He had changed into dry clothes as well, and his hair was still damp, curling slightly at the ends. "Hot tea," he said, setting the tray beside her. "And a poultice for your ankle, my mother's recipe for sprains." "Thank you." Clara accepted the tea gratefully, letting its warmth seep into her chilled hands. Wyatt knelt before her and carefully applied the poultice, wrapping her ankle with a clean bandage. His hands were strong yet gentle, and Clara found herself studying his bent head, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the set of his broad shoulders beneath his clean shirt. "There," he said, securing the bandage. "Keep it elevated. I'll check on it in the morning." "The storm?" Clara asked, trying to distract herself from his proximity. "Still raging, but the creek seems to have stopped rising. We should be safe now." He hesitated, then sat beside her on the bed, a respectful distance between them. "Clara, I need to ask you something." Her pulse quickened. "Yes." "Why did you come out in the storm? You could have been seriously hurt." The question surprised her. "I was worried. About the ranch, about everyone, about me." His voice was quiet, his eyes intent on hers. Clara couldn't lie, not with him looking at her that way. "Yes, about you." Wyatt's expression softened. "I've been thinking a lot lately, about how different this place feels since you came, how different I feel." Clara held her breath, afraid to hope, afraid to believe what his words might mean. "I know your position here is complicated," Wyatt continued. "You came with nothing, needing work, and I don't want you to feel obligated or indebted in any way. But I can't deny what I'm feeling, Clara. I care for you. More than I should, perhaps." "Wyatt, you don't have to say anything now," he interrupted gently. "I just wanted you to know. Whatever you decide, if you want to stay as you are, or if you want to leave entirely, I'll respect your choice." He rose to leave, but Clara caught his hand. "I care for you too," she whispered. "I've tried not to, but I can't help it." The smile that spread across Wyatt's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He lifted her hand to his lips, placing a gentle kiss on her knuckles. "Rest now," he said. "We'll talk more when you're feeling better." After he left, Clara sat in stunned silence, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched it. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something dangerous hope. The storm lasted 3 days, keeping everyone close to the ranch house. Clara's ankle improved enough that she could move around with the aid of a makeshift crutch Wyatt fashioned for her, but she was still largely confined to the house. This forced inactivity gave her time to think, to consider what Wyatt's confession meant and what she truly wanted. On the fourth day, the sun finally broke through the clouds. Clara was sitting on the porch, her injured foot propped on a stool, enjoying the fresh air when Charlie came bounding up the steps. "Miss Clara, you're outside," he exclaimed with delight. "Does your ankle feel better?" "Much better, thank you, Charlie," she replied with a smile. "How are the horses doing after their adventure?" "They're fine. Uncle Wyatt says they are tougher than they look." The boy sat beside her, swinging his legs. "Can I ask you something, Miss Clara?" "Of course." "Are you going to marry Uncle Wyatt?" Clara nearly choked on her tea. "What makes you ask that?" Charlie shrugged. "Pa says Uncle Wyatt looks at you the way he used to look at my ma before they were married. And I heard Uncle Wyatt tell Pa that he's never met anyone like you before." Heat rose to Clara's cheeks. "Charlie, relationships between grown-ups are complicated." "But do you like him?" the boy pressed. "Because he likes you a whole lot, I can tell." Before Clara could formulate a response, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Wyatt and James were returning from checking fence lines damaged in the storm. They rode into the yard, dismounting near the porch. "Charlie, go help with the horses," James called to his son. The boy rolled his eyes but obeyed, running down the steps. James followed him, leaving Wyatt and Clara alone. "How's the ankle today?" Wyatt asked, climbing the porch steps. "Better. I might be able to resume my duties tomorrow, at least the lighter ones." "No rush. We've managed this long." He sat in the chair Charlie had vacated. "Beautiful day after all that rain." "Yes, it is." Clara fidgeted with her teacup, suddenly nervous. "Wyatt, about what you said the other night." "I meant it," he said simply. "Every word. I've been thinking about it, about us." Clara took a deep breath. "My life before I came here. It wasn't good. My father died when I was 16 and my mother remarried a man who was cruel. When she died last year, he made it clear I wasn't welcome anymore. I worked as a seamstress, then as a shop girl, but the pay was never enough. I was heading west because I heard there were opportunities for women to start fresh." Wyatt listened intently, his blue eyes never leaving her face. "When the stagecoach dropped me at that station, I had $1 left, $1 to my name." She pulled the coin from her pocket, where she still carried it as a reminder. "I felt worthless, like that was all I was worth in this world." "Clara, please let me finish," she said gently. "Then you came along and offered me not just a job, but dignity. You treated me with respect from the first moment, never asking for anything in return. These past weeks, I've come to care for this place, for Charlie and James, and most of all for you." Wyatt's expression softened, hope lighting his eyes. "But I need to know that whatever is between us isn't because you feel sorry for me, or because I'm convenient, or because—" "I love you," Wyatt interrupted, the words falling from his lips with such sincerity that Clara's breath caught. "Not out of pity or convenience. I love your strength, your kindness, the way you took to ranch life without complaint. I love how you treat Charlie like he matters, how you restored warmth to this house. I love you, Clara Matthews, for exactly who you are." Tears filled Clara's eyes. "I've never had anyone say those words to me before." Wyatt reached for her hand, enfolding it in his much larger one. "Then I'll say them every day until you believe them, until you understand that you are priceless to me." Clara's heart felt too full for her chest. "I love you too," she whispered, the words foreign but wonderful on her tongue. Wyatt's smile was radiant. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, a question more than a demand, and Clara answered by reaching up to touch his face, drawing him closer. When they parted, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. "I don't want to rush you, Clara. We can take this as slow as you need." "I don't want to be your housekeeper anymore," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. Wyatt pulled back slightly, confusion crossing his features. "What do you want to be?" Clara smiled, feeling braver than she ever had. "Your wife, if you'll have me." Joy transformed Wyatt's face. "Are you proposing to me, Clara Matthews?" "I suppose I am," she laughed. "Is that allowed?" "It's allowed," he assured her, pulling her carefully into his arms, mindful of her injured ankle. "And my answer is yes, 1,000 times yes." Their engagement announcement was met with knowing smiles from James and whoops of delight from Charlie, who claimed credit for bringing them together. The ranch hands offered hearty congratulations, though Clara overheard one of them remark to another, "Told you she'd have a ring by Christmas." The wedding was set for the following month, enough time for Clara's ankle to heal completely and for Wyatt to ride to Helena to purchase a proper ring and wedding clothes. In his absence, Clara found herself missing him with an intensity that surprised her. The house seemed empty without his presence, the days longer. On the day of his expected return, Clara waited anxiously on the porch, scanning the horizon for any sign of riders. When she finally spotted a lone figure approaching, her heart leapt. But as the rider drew closer, she realized it wasn't Wyatt but a stranger. The man rode directly to the house, tipping his hat as he approached. "Madam, I'm looking for Wyatt Blackwood." "He's not here at present," Clara replied cautiously. "I'm Clara Matthews, his fiancée. Can I help you?" The stranger's expression turned grim. "Name's Deputy Marshal Wilson. I'm afraid I have bad news. There was a robbery at the bank in Helena yesterday. Mr. Blackwood was there, making a withdrawal." Fear clutched at Clara's heart. "Is he hurt?" "Shot in the shoulder. Doctor says he'll recover, but he's laid up at the clinic in Helena. Asked me to come tell you, said you'd be worried." Clara's mind raced. "I need to go to him. Right away." "Madam, it's a 2-day ride. I don't care. I need to be there." James, who had come around the house in time to hear the news, stepped forward. "I'll take you, Clara. We can leave within the hour." True to his word, James had a wagon ready in short order. Charlie begged to come along, but his father insisted he stay behind to help the hands with the ranch. The journey to Helena was long and uncomfortable, the wagon jolting over rough roads, but Clara barely noticed, her thoughts fixed solely on Wyatt. They reached Helena late on the second day, the town's lights glimmering in the dusk. The deputy marshal had directed them to Dr. Porter's clinic, a modest building on a side street off the main thoroughfare. Clara's legs were stiff from the long ride, but she nearly ran into the clinic, James close behind her. A stern-faced nurse directed them to a room at the back of the building. When Clara entered, she found Wyatt propped up in bed, his left shoulder heavily bandaged, his face pale but his eyes alert. Those eyes widened when he saw her. "Clara, what are you doing here?" She rushed to his side, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Did you think I wouldn't come?" Wyatt reached for her with his good arm, pulling her close. "I didn't want you to worry." "Well, I did worry, terribly." She examined his face, noting the lines of pain around his mouth. "How bad is it?" "Clean through the shoulder. Doctor says I was lucky missed anything vital. I'll be sore for a while, but I'll heal." He squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry about the ring. The money was stolen." Clara laughed through her tears. "I don't care about a ring. I care about you." James stepped into the room, nodding at Wyatt. "Good to see you alive, boss." "James, you brought her all this way." "Couldn't have stopped her if I tried," James replied with a rare smile. "I'll go see about rooms at the hotel. You two have some talking to do, I reckon." After he left, Clara sat carefully on the edge of Wyatt's bed. The marshal said you were making a withdrawal when the robbery happened. Yes. Wyatt's expression turned sheepish. I wanted to surprise you. I was going to buy land adjoining ours to the north. Beautiful piece with a small lake. Thought maybe someday we could build a house there just for us. Clara's heart swelled with love for this man who was always thinking of her happiness. We don't need another house. The ranch is our home. Our home, Wyatt repeated, smiling. I like the sound of that. The doctor insisted Wyatt remain at the clinic for another week to ensure the wound didn't become infected. Clara refused to leave his side, sleeping in a chair beside his bed despite his protests. During the day, she would sit and read to him, or they would talk about their plans for the future. On the third day, Wyatt asked her to retrieve something from his saddlebags, which James had recovered from the livery stable where Wyatt had left his horse. There's a small pouch in the left bag, he instructed. Bring it to me. Clara found the pouch and handed it to him. Wyatt opened it and tipped the contents into his palm, a simple gold band. It was my mother's, he explained. I was carrying it separately from the money, thankfully. It's not fancy, but until I can get you something better, it's perfect, Clara interrupted, her eyes filling with tears. I couldn't ask for anything more meaningful. Wyatt slipped the ring onto her finger. It was slightly too large, but Clara didn't care. We'll be married as soon as we get home, he promised. True to his word, Wyatt and Clara were married in the parlor of the Blackwood Ranch house 2 weeks after their return from Helena. Wyatt's shoulder was still bandaged beneath his new suit, but he stood tall and proud as Clara walked toward him on James's arm. She wore a simple cream-colored dress purchased in Helena, her hair adorned with wildflowers that Charlie had picked that morning. The local preacher officiated, his words resonating through the room filled with ranch hands and neighbors who had come to witness the union. I, Wyatt, take you, Clara, to be my lawfully wedded wife, Wyatt recited, his voice steady and sure. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. When it was Clara's turn, she spoke the words with conviction, her heart full to bursting. As Wyatt slipped his mother's ring back onto her finger, now properly sized by the jeweler in town, Clara felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. By the power vested in me, the preacher announced, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Wyatt's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, and when they turned to face their guests as Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, the cheers nearly raised the roof. The celebration continued well into the evening, with food, music, and dancing in the barn, which had been decorated with lanterns and fall flowers. Despite his injured shoulder, Wyatt insisted on one dance with his bride, holding her close as they swayed to a slow melody played by one of the hands on a fiddle. Happy, Mrs. Blackwood, he murmured against her hair. Happier than I ever thought possible, Clara replied, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Later that night, alone in the master bedroom that was now theirs, Clara stood by the window, looking out at the moonlit landscape. Wyatt came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? He asked softly. Clara turned in his embrace. About how much my life has changed since that day at the stagecoach station, about how close I came to giving up hope. I'm glad you didn't, Wyatt said, his voice husky with emotion. I didn't know it then, but I was waiting for you. My life was empty until you filled it. I was worth only $1, Clara whispered, remembering her despair. Wyatt shook his head, cupping her face in his hands. You were always priceless, Clara, always. It just took someone seeing you clearly to remind you of that truth. His kiss was tender, a seal on his words, a promise for their future. And as Clara surrendered to his embrace, She knew that her worth had never been in that single silver dollar, but in the heart that had never stopped believing in love, even when the world had given her every reason to doubt. Winter settled over the Blackwood Ranch, transforming the landscape into a pristine expanse of white. Clara adjusted to married life with surprising ease, finding joy in the simple rhythm of days spent working alongside her husband to maintain their home and land. Wyatt's shoulder healed slowly but steadily, and though he couldn't handle the more strenuous ranch work at first, he found ways to contribute. Often, Clara would find him at the desk in the study, poring over ledgers and maps, planning improvements for the spring. "What do you think about expanding the garden?" he asked one evening as they sat before the fire. "The southern slope gets good sun and the soil's rich there. We could grow more vegetables, maybe even try some fruit trees." "I'd love that," Clara replied, looking up from her mending. "Sarah's notes mention peach trees that used to grow near the creek. My mother planted those," Wyatt recalled with a smile. "They died during a particularly harsh winter when I was about Charlie's age. She was heartbroken." Clara set aside her sewing and moved to sit beside him on the sofa. "Tell me more about your parents. You rarely speak of them." Wyatt put his arm around her, drawing her close. "My father was a hard man, determined, visionary in his way, but demanding. He built this ranch from nothing through sheer force of will. My mother was his opposite, gentle, patient, always ready with a kind word or a song." "You take after her, I think," Clara observed. Wyatt chuckled. "James would disagree. He says I have my father's stubbornness. Perhaps the best of both, then." Clara rested her head on his shoulder, content in the warmth of their shared home. "I wish I could have known them." "My mother would have loved you," Wyatt said softly. "She always worried I'd never find someone who could see past the ranch, past the Blackwood name and fortune, to the man beneath." "Fortune?" Clara lifted her head, surprised. "I thought the ranch was prosperous, but my father was shrewd with investments," Wyatt explained. "Railroad stocks, mining interests. The ranch is only part of what he built. I never mentioned it because it doesn't matter much to me, and frankly, I've seen how money changes how people look at you." Clara absorbed this information, understanding now why Wyatt lived relatively simply despite his apparent means. "Is that why you were making such a large withdrawal in Helena?" "Partly. I wanted to expand our holdings while land is still available, but I also wanted to set up a trust for Charlie's education. Sarah always wanted him to have the opportunity to go to university if he chooses." Clara's heart swelled with love for this man who thought so carefully about others' futures. "You're a good man, Wyatt Blackwood." "I try to be the man you deserve," he replied, kissing her forehead. As Christmas approached, the ranch became a hive of activity. Clara enlisted Charlie's help in decorating the house with pine boughs and red ribbons. Together, they baked cookies and candies using recipes Clara remembered from her childhood. On Christmas Eve, after a festive dinner with James and Charlie, Wyatt presented Clara with a small package wrapped in silver paper. "Merry Christmas, my love," he said, his eyes twinkling with anticipation. Clara unwrapped it carefully to find a velvet box. Inside nestled a delicate gold locket, intricately engraved with flowers and vines. When she opened it, she found a tiny photograph of Wyatt on one side, the other side empty. "I thought perhaps someday the other side might hold a picture of our child," Wyatt said softly, a question in his voice. Tears filled Clara's eyes as she understood his meaning. "I would like that very much," she whispered, reaching up to kiss him. Charlie, oblivious to the deeper significance of the moment, bounced in his seat. "My turn for presents." The adults laughed, the emotional moment broken, and the gift-giving continued. Later, After James and Charlie had returned to their cabin and the house was quiet, Clara and Wyatt lay entwined in their bed, the moonlight casting silver patterns on the walls through the frost-covered windows. "Did you mean what you said earlier?" Clara asked, her voice hushed in the darkness. "About a child, I did," Wyatt confirmed, his hand tracing gentle patterns on her back. "I've been thinking about it more and more lately, seeing you with Charlie, how natural you are with him. I can't help but imagine you with our own children." Clara smiled against his chest. "I've been thinking about it too. I never thought I'd have the chance for a family of my own." "You have one now," Wyatt assured her, "and it can grow as large as we wish it to." Winter gave way to spring, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots pushing through the softening earth. Clara's garden plans came to fruition as she and Wyatt worked side by side, turning soil, planting seeds, and setting young fruit tree saplings into carefully prepared holes. "These won't bear fruit for a few years," Wyatt cautioned as they planted the last of the peach trees. "Then we'll just have to stick around to see them mature," Clara replied with a smile, wiping dirt from her hands onto her apron. Wyatt pulled her into his arms, heedless of the mud on both their clothes. "Planning to stay a while, are you, Mrs. Blackwood?" "Forever, if you'll have me," she answered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. Their kiss was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. They turned to see a rider coming fast down the road to the ranch house. "That's Timothy from the Collins place," Wyatt said, recognizing the young man. "Something's wrong." They hurried to meet the rider, who reined in his lathered horse with evident relief at finding them. "Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Blackwood," Timothy called, dismounting quickly. "There's trouble. The river's flooded and taken out the bridge. The Collins family is stranded on the wrong side with a sick child. Mr. Collins sent me to ask for help." Wyatt immediately shifted into action. "How bad is the flooding?" "Worst I've ever seen. The spring melt came too fast with all that rain last week. Clara, go tell James what's happening. Have him gather the men and meet me at the barn. We'll need ropes, blankets, and the doctor if we can find him." Clara nodded and rushed to find James while Wyatt led Timothy toward the barn, already asking detailed questions about the situation. Within an hour, Wyatt and 5 of the hands were riding out, laden with supplies. Clara watched them go, worry gnawing at her stomach. The rivers in spring flood could be deadly. She'd heard enough stories since coming to Montana to know the danger Wyatt was riding into. "He'll be fine," James assured her, standing beside her on the porch. "Wyatt knows these lands better than anyone, and the Collins place isn't that far." Clara nodded, trying to believe him. "I'll have food ready when they return." The waiting was excruciating. Clara kept busy in the kitchen, preparing hearty stew and fresh bread, but her mind remained fixed on Wyatt and the others, imagining all manner of disasters. It was nearly midnight when the sound of horses announced their return. Clara rushed outside, a lantern held high, scanning the group for Wyatt. Her heart leapt when she saw him, leading his horse with a small bundle cradled in one arm. "The Collins baby," he explained as he approached. "Fever broke on the way back, thank God. The rest of the family is following with Ben and Timothy." Clara peered at the sleeping child, a little girl no more than 2 years old. "Bring her inside. I've prepared the guest room." The next few days saw the Blackwood Ranch transformed into a temporary refuge for the Collins family mother, father, and 3 children, while arrangements were made to rebuild the bridge that had been their only access to town. Clara found herself busy from dawn to dusk, cooking, cleaning, and helping care for the children, but she didn't mind. There was satisfaction in being able to provide sanctuary for those in need. Wyatt watched her with growing admiration, often pausing in his work to observe how naturally she managed the expanded household. "You're remarkable," he told her one evening as they finally had a moment alone. "The way you've taken all this in stride." Clara smiled, leaning against him wearily. "I'm happy to help. Mrs. Collins is beside herself with worry for her home. We'll get them back there soon. The men have almost finished the temporary bridge." Wyatt kissed the top of her head. "But I've been thinking." "A dangerous pastime," Clara teased. "Indeed." His voice turned serious. "Watching you with little Emma these past days. Clara, you're going to be an extraordinary mother." Clara's breath caught. "Wyatt, I know we've talked about children someday, but seeing you now, I can't help but hope that someday comes sooner rather than later." His hand moved to rest gently on her stomach. "Unless you're not ready," Clara covered his hand with her own, her heart full. "I am ready, more than ready." The look of joy that spread across Wyatt's face was something Clara knew she would remember all her days. By early summer, the Collins family had returned to their repaired home, and life at the Blackwood Ranch settled back into its normal rhythms. The garden flourished under Clara's attentive care, the young fruit trees took root, and the cattle grew fat on the abundant grass of the valley. But the greatest change was the one Clara kept close to her heart for weeks before finally sharing the news with Wyatt. She chose a quiet evening when they were walking along the creek, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. "I have something to tell you," she said, stopping beneath a cottonwood tree. Wyatt turned to her, his expression curious. "What is it?" Clara took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Wyatt stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. Then, with a whoop of joy that startled a flock of birds from the nearby trees, he lifted Clara off her feet and spun her in a circle. "Careful," she laughed, clinging to his shoulders. "I've been feeling rather queasy in the mornings." Wyatt immediately set her down, his face a picture of concern. "I'm sorry. Are you all right? Do you need to sit? Should I carry you back to the house?" "I'm fine," Clara assured him, touched by his concern. "The doctor in town says everything is progressing normally. The baby should arrive in early winter." Wyatt's hand returned to her stomach, his touch reverent. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." The news of Clara's pregnancy spread quickly through the ranch and surrounding properties. James offered gruff congratulations, while Charlie was ecstatic at the prospect of a cousin. The ranch hands presented the couple with a handcrafted cradle, made from wood harvested on Blackwood land. As Clara's body changed with the growing life inside her, Wyatt became increasingly protective. He insisted on hiring additional help for the house, despite Clara's protests that she was perfectly capable of managing her duties. "You're carrying precious cargo," he would say whenever she objected to his fussing. "The most valuable treasure on this ranch." By autumn, Clara's condition was unmistakable. Her dresses altered to accommodate her rounded belly. She found herself tiring more easily but refused to be confined to the house, often sitting in the garden with her sewing or a book, watching the ranch activities from a comfortable distance. It was during one such afternoon that Charlie came running to her, his face alight with excitement. "Aunt Clara, Uncle Wyatt says to come quick. There's a surprise." Curious, Clara allowed Charlie to help her to her feet and lead her toward the barn. As they approached, she could hear strange noises coming from inside, not the usual sounds of horses or ranch work, but something smaller, higher pitched. When Charlie pushed open the barn door, Clara gasped in delight. In one of the stalls, nestled in fresh straw, was a mother cat with 5 tiny kittens. "They were born last night," Charlie explained proudly. "Uncle Wyatt said you might like to see them." Clara carefully lowered herself onto a bale of hay near the stall, enchanted by the tiny mewling creatures. "They're beautiful. You can hold one if you want," Charlie offered, reaching in to scoop up a small orange tabby. "This one's my favorite." He placed the kitten gently in Clara's hands. The tiny creature fit in her palm, its eyes still closed, its body warm and vibrating with a barely audible purr. "Hello, little one," Clara whispered, stroking its soft fur with one finger. The barn door opened again, and Wyatt entered, his face breaking into a smile at the sight of his wife cradling the kitten. "I see Charlie showed you our new arrivals," he said, coming to sit beside her. "They're perfect," Clara replied, still focused on the tiny life in her hands. "So small and vulnerable, yet so complete." Wyatt's hand came to rest on her rounded belly. "Much like another little life we know." Clara leaned against him, a wave of contentment washing over her. "I never imagined I could be this happy." "Nor I," Wyatt admitted. "For years after my parents died, I thought my life would be just the ranch, the responsibilities. Then you came along with nothing but $1 and the clothes on your back, and suddenly everything changed." "That dollar," Clara mused. "I still keep it, in my jewelry box. As a reminder of how far I've come, of how wrong I was to measure my worth by what I possessed." Wyatt kissed her temple. "You were always priceless, Clara, from the first moment I saw you." Winter arrived with a vengeance that year, bringing howling blizzards and temperatures that froze the creek solid. As Clara's time grew near, Wyatt insisted that the doctor from town stay at the ranch, unwilling to risk being unable to reach help when the baby came. Dr. Hamilton, a kind elderly man who had delivered most of the children in the county, accepted the arrangement with good humor. "Been caught in too many winter storms trying to reach laboring mothers," he told Clara during one of his examinations. "Much prefer to be on hand when the little one decides to make an appearance." Clara was grateful for his presence, especially as December progressed and her discomfort increased. The baby was active, kicking and turning at all hours, making sleep difficult. "She's going to be spirited," Clara predicted one night as she guided Wyatt's hand to feel a particularly energetic movement. "She?" Wyatt questioned with a raised eyebrow. "You sound certain." Clara smiled mysteriously. "Just a feeling." The baby arrived during the worst blizzard of the season, 2 days before Christmas. Clara's labor began shortly after midnight, waking her from a fitful sleep with a sharp pain that took her breath away. "Wyatt," she gasped, clutching his arm. "It's time." What followed was the most challenging experience of Clara's life. Hours of pain that seemed endless, punctuated by Dr. Hamilton's calm instructions and Wyatt's unwavering support. He never left her side, wiping her brow, holding her hand, murmuring encouragement even when she cried that she couldn't continue. "You can," he assured her. "You're the strongest person I know, Clara Blackwood." As dawn broke, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, Clara gave one final, tremendous push, and their child entered the world with a lusty cry that filled the room. "A girl," Dr. Hamilton announced, placing the squalling infant on Clara's chest. "And a fine, healthy one at that." Clara looked down at her daughter, overwhelmed by a love so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. The baby had a shock of dark hair, still damp from birth, and when she briefly opened her eyes, Clara caught a glimpse of deep blue Wyatt's eyes. "Hello, little one," she whispered, echoing the words she had spoken to the kitten months before. "We've been waiting for you." Wyatt sat beside them on the bed, his face a study in wonder as he gently touched his daughter's tiny hand. "She's perfect," he breathed. "Absolutely perfect." "Would you like to hold her?" Clara asked. With trembling hands, Wyatt gathered his daughter into his arms. The baby seemed impossibly small against his broad chest, but he cradled her with natural ease, his expression one of pure adoration. "What shall we name her?" he asked, unable to take his eyes off the infant's face. I was thinking of Sarah, Clara suggested softly, after your sister, Sarah Hope Blackwood. Wyatt's eyes filled with tears. Sarah Hope, he repeated. It's beautiful, she's beautiful. Later, when Dr. Hamilton had gone to rest and the baby was sleeping peacefully in the cradle beside their bed, Wyatt sat with Clara, his arm around her shoulders, both of them watching their daughter's tiny chest rise and fall. I never thought I could love anyone as much as I love you, Wyatt confessed. But looking at her, it's a different kind of love, but just as powerful. I know, Clara agreed, leaning against him tiredly but contentedly. It's as if my heart has grown to make room for both of you. Wyatt reached into his pocket and withdrew something that glinted in the lamplight, Clara's silver dollar. I borrowed this from your jewelry box a few days ago. I wanted to have it with me when our child was born. Why? Clara asked, surprised. Because it reminds me of how we found each other. Of how something that seemed so small, a chance meeting at a stagecoach station, can change the course of an entire life. He pressed the coin into her palm. Someday, we'll tell Sarah the story of how her mother came to this ranch with nothing but this coin and created a life worth more than all the gold in Montana. Clara closed her fingers around the dollar, tears spilling down her cheeks. I love you, Wyatt Blackwood. And I love you, Clara Blackwood. More than words can express. As the blizzard raged outside, the little family remained cocooned in warmth and love, the silver dollar a tangible reminder of how far they had come and the priceless journey they had only just begun. 5 years passed, bringing changes both large and small to the Blackwood Ranch. The fruit trees in Clara's garden began to bear, their branches heavy with peaches, apples, and cherries each summer. The ranch prospered under Wyatt's careful management, expanding to include additional grazing lands to the east. Charlie, now 17, had grown into a thoughtful young man with dreams of attending university in the east, dreams that Wyatt and Clara fully supported. And in the heart of it all was Sarah, a spirited, dark-haired girl with her father's blue eyes and her mother's quiet determination. She was joined 2 years after her birth by a brother, William James Blackwood, a sturdy, laughing boy who had his father wrapped around his tiny finger from the moment he drew his first breath. Clara's days were filled with the joyful chaos of motherhood, ranch life, and community involvement. She had started a small school for the children of neighboring ranches, teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic 3 days a week in a converted outbuilding. You're a natural teacher, Wyatt observed one evening as he helped her organize books for the next day's lessons. Just like your father. Clara smiled, touched that he remembered that small detail about her past. I think he would have approved of this life, of what we've built here. I know he would be proud of you, Wyatt replied, kissing her cheek. As I am every day. Their conversation was interrupted by Sarah bursting into the room, her dress muddy and her hair escaping its braids. Papa, the new foal is trying to stand up. Come see. Wyatt laughed and scooped his daughter into his arms. Is that why you're covered in mud, young lady? Sarah nodded enthusiastically. I was helping Uncle James watch the mare. William is there too, but he got scared when the foal wobbled. Then we'd better go rescue your brother, Clara suggested, rising from her chair. And perhaps find you a clean dress before dinner. The family made their way to the barn, where they found 4-year-old William sitting safely on James's shoulders, wide-eyed as he watched the newborn foal take tentative steps on spindly legs. Look, Mama, he called when he spotted Clara. Baby horse. I see, sweetheart, Clara replied, accepting James's offer to lift William down into her arms. Isn't he beautiful? The foal was indeed a handsome creature, with a gleaming black coat and a small white star on his forehead. As they watched, he managed to stand steadily and took a few wobbling steps toward his mother. "He's going to be a fine horse," Wyatt predicted, his arm around Sarah's shoulders. "Strong and brave, just like you, Sarah girl." Sarah beamed at her father's praise. "Can he be my horse when he's bigger?" "Please, Papa." "We'll see," Wyatt hedged, though Clara could tell by the look in his eyes that the foal was already destined to be Sarah's. "He'll need a lot of training first." "I'll help," Sarah promised earnestly. "I'll learn everything about horses." Later that night, after the children were tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Clara and Wyatt sat on the porch swing, enjoying the mild summer evening. Clara's head rested on Wyatt's shoulder, his arm around her waist, the position as natural to them now as breathing. "Do you ever think about that day at the stagecoach station?" Wyatt asked, his voice soft in the darkness. "How different our lives might have been if I hadn't stopped there that evening." Clara considered the question. "Sometimes. But then I think perhaps we would have found each other anyway somehow. I'd like to believe that. As would I." Wyatt's fingers traced patterns on her arm. "Though I'm grateful we didn't have to test that theory." Clara smiled, remembering the frightened young woman she had been, clutching a single dollar and believing it represented her worth. "I never thanked you properly, you know." "For what?" "For seeing me. Not just the desperate girl at the station, but me. For believing I was worth something when I couldn't see it myself." Wyatt turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "Clara Blackwood, you are the greatest blessing of my life. You gave me a home when this was just a house. You gave me children when I thought I would always be alone. You gave me purpose and joy beyond anything I could have imagined." Tears pricked at Clara's eyes. Even after all these years, Wyatt's words could still move her deeply. "And you gave me a life I never dreamed possible, a family, a place to belong." Wyatt reached into his pocket and withdrew a familiar object, the silver dollar, now worn smooth from years of handling. "I had this made into something for you, an anniversary gift, a few months early." He pressed it into her palm. Clara looked down to find the dollar had been fashioned into a locket, smaller than the one he had given her years ago but exquisitely crafted. When she opened it, she found tiny photographs, Wyatt on one side, Sarah and William on the other. "Oh, Wyatt," she breathed, tears now flowing freely. "It's beautiful. I thought you might wear it close to your heart," he said, helping her fasten it around her neck. "A reminder of where we started and how far we've come." Clara touched the locket, feeling the slight curve of the coin against her fingers. "From $1 to this life. It's like a fairy tale." "Not a fairy tale," Wyatt corrected gently. "A love story, our love story." As the stars appeared one by one in the vast Montana sky, Clara leaned into her husband's embrace, the silver dollar locket resting against her heart. From this porch, she could see the entirety of the life they had built together, the ranch house with its warm lights, the barn where new life had begun that very day, the garden she had planted with such hope, the school building where she shared her knowledge with eager young minds. All of it from nothing but a chance encounter and the courage to believe in the possibility of love. All of it proof that her worth had never been measured in dollars, but in the capacity of her heart to love and be loved in return. "Our love story," Clara echoed, raising her face for Wyatt's kiss. "And it's only just beginning."